I was doing the washing up and I was looking at our little composting bin, and it got me thinking about something which I've never mentioned in a podcast before, but something that I've been passionate about all my life, and that is waste. I try to waste as little as I can. I try to reuse as much as I can. I try to extend the life of things as long as I can, because it really breaks my heart to see how much stuff goes into landfill and just thrown away. It really, really does pain me, and it really, really does upset me. And I am a strong supporter about trying to reduce waste. So what did it get me thinking? It got me thinking that we live in a time, and this is probably nothing new to many of you, where planned obsolescence is just an accepted fact. Many of the creativity tools that we use exist in this planned obsolescent world, where if it's software, you're going to kind of need to keep buying computers to cope with all of the updates, getting more and more powerful to do minute increments of processing for many of us. I appreciate if you do graphic intensive work that perhaps you need more and more powerful machines. But for many of us, the computers we have are powerful enough to do the projects that we need to do. And I'm not just talking about computers, I'm talking about the cameras, the microphones, the recorders, the guitar pedals, the effects, the tools that we all perhaps use on a daily basis, that for many of us, we may have been in this gear acquisition or gas mindset where we want to keep buying it. It's buying the new gear that gets us excited. And I've talked about gas on my YouTube channel quite a few times before, and how I've been trying to get away from buying gear just for the sake of buying gear or the latest flashy thing, because it's really bad for my creativity, because you're always constantly learning a new thing and you never really learn enough about it. And when you push the stuff that you have to its limits, that's where the interesting, for me, things come. When you break the technology, and I don't mean physically break, when you push it to its boundaries, that's where interesting things start to happen. And when you learn a tool inside out, upside down and back to front, that is when you realize that you don't need to move on, because there's usually an infinite amount of things that you can do with something. So where am I going with this? Well, I was thinking maybe it's time, maybe the rebellion within us, creative rebellion, is to start repurposing more of the things that end up being thrown away. Now, I know in the sound world, and I can't really speak for other creative fields, that there are artists out there, myself included, who have done this a little bit, but not as much as I hoped. Artists like Heimbach, for example, who are finding and making content using discarded or gear which is old from the 50s, 60s, things which maybe don't work as well anymore. But that's the interesting thing about them. They make weird sounds because they're not completely functional. I can hear some of you shouting out, but digital technology is not like that. If it breaks, it breaks. And yes, that is a shocking aspect that perhaps needs to be considered, and maybe legislation from governments needs to be brought in, as if that will ever happen, to prevent digital waste and digital equipment waste. And older gear, say up until at least the 1980s, early 2000s, early 90s, could be fixed and repaired in some way and given new life. And that got me thinking about what projects could we all do? What could we do to be more environmentally sustainable with our creativity? It's an open question. I don't really have the answers to this one. But I'd love to hear from you, depending on your field, what you could do to try and be more sustainable in your practice. Does it mean going back and rooting through charity shops to find gizmos that you could apply in your practice? Does it mean finding old bits of gear online through eBay, through junk shops, through junkyards even, and recycling tips? Does it mean using a piece of gear until you physically push it to all its limits and maybe do actually break it in some way, but in a good way, because you've used the life out of it? And I think about my car. I recently sadly had to replace my car because it really did die, but I'd pushed that car. I got over 130,000 miles of me driving that car. I was kind of pleased with it. I drove it, for want of a better word, into the ground, and it still would have kept going, and I'm hoping bits of it have been transplanted and put into other older cars. but there were some more serious fundamental issues with the bodywork which could not be fixed and were getting dangerous. That's part of my ethos of trying to use something until, I can't use it anymore. I have suffered from gear acquisition syndrome in the past. It makes me sad that I fell into that mindset. What you're hearing here is a trend that I've been talking about over the last couple of podcasts since I did Get a Grip. I've got so much cool stuff, too much cool stuff, that I don't need anything else. The differences of what something will do are so marginal now. And that was what disturbed me as well. I spend some time, so much less time now, on online groups. And particularly in the audio world, all it is people shouting at one another, saying this product, the newer product, is better because it has maybe 1 dB of gain improvement on the mic preamps and it sounds better, blah, blah. It really doesn't. If you are a true creative, if you are an artist, then that doesn't matter. And if we think about this, with all this consumerism going on, that people are throwing away this older gear because they've got the next best thing, then that's an opportunity for us to jump in and purchase this stuff at a lower price and use it. Buy as many recorders as you possibly can at a much cheaper price and create some multi-space insulation. The possibilities are endless, with the big plus point that we are perhaps, at least in a very small, minute way, trying to be environmentally sustainable in our creative practice. Please send a tweet or drop me an email about how you feel you can be more sustainably creative in your practice.